guys? Today we're going to be looking at distributing a negative number. So we're distributing multiplication using the distributive property. We're just, again, adding one more layer to what we already know about using the distributive property. Essentially, what we're going to be doing is looking at when there's a negative number outside that's going to say hi and multiply with all of the numbers inside, all of the terms inside the parentheses. So let's go ahead and get started. When distributing a negative number, you are multiplying each term within the parentheses by the negative term outside the parentheses. This results in finding the opposite of each term within the parentheses. We're going to look specifically at what that looks like. In fact, there's an example right here. Notice I have negative 3 times the quantity of positive 2 and positive 4x. So I've got positive in those parentheses, positive terms, but I'm going to multiply them by a negative. We're going to see what happens to these terms when they're multiplied by a negative. So negative 3 is going to come into the house and say hi and multiply with everyone inside. Remember, when you're multiplying two numbers with opposite signs, negative positive or positive negative, your sign is always going to be negative. So negative 3 times positive 2, that's negative 6, plus negative 3 times positive 4x. Negative 3 times positive 4 is going to be a negative 12x. I could kind of leave it like this. Again, you don't want two numbers bumping up against each other, two symbols, a plus and a minus. But I like to simplify this. Algebra, we like to have as few symbols, numbers, whatever as possible. Subtracting a negative, that's just like, or adding a negative, that's just like subtracting that number. Notice my positive turned into negative. So we made everything the opposite. So when you're multiplying by a negative, you're making the terms the opposite of what they were before. Let's take a look at a couple more examples here. I have negative 2 times the quantity of g plus 5. Say hi, multiply. Again, when you're just multiplying a constant times a variable, you can just stick them right together. Negative 2 times 1g, that's negative 2g. Negative 2 times positive 5. Wait, I'll drop down my plus. Negative 2 times positive 5 is negative 10. I'm adding a negative. That's the same thing as subtracting. We can kind of get rid of that plus. So negative 2g minus 10. So I had positive inside the parentheses. Now I have negative, right? Because we can treat this as a negative because the symbol always follows the number after it. Okay, this one's a little bit different. Now I got a negative inside the parentheses. Let's see what happens. Negative 2 times negative g, when the signs are the same, your answer is positive. If you hate to hate, you love, it's positive. So 2g, drop down the plus, negative 2 times positive 5, negative 10. Again, if I'm adding a negative, I can just simplify that and say 2g minus 10. So I started with a negative positive inside the parentheses, and my final answer is a positive negative. Everything became the opposite when I'm multiplying by a negative number. All right. Negative 2 times g, that's negative 2g. Drop down the minus. Negative 2 times 5, negative 10. Subtracting a negative is like adding plus plus. Negative 2g plus 10. I had positive, negative. Now I have negative, positive. It's the opposite. I also could have just treated this because that minus travels with the 5, I could have just treated it like a negative 5. Negative 2 times negative 5 is positive 10. Or I could drop down the subtraction, maybe you're used to that, and then multiply it by a positive 5. Call it negative 10. Okay, I've got negative, negative inside my parentheses. So, this time I am going to treat this like a negative 5. So my guess is, so far I'm seeing that it's always the opposite. So if I have a negative, negative, I think when I'm multiplying by negative on the outside, my final answer is going to be positive, positive. Let's take a look. Negative 2 times negative g. When the signs are the same, the answer is positive, so that's positive 2g. Now let's just, rather than drop down the minus, I would have minus negative 10, which would minus minus make a plus plus. Instead, I'm going to just treat this like a negative 5. Negative 2 times negative 5, positive 10. And I don't have to do all these steps where I'm changing it. If I just consider that plus or minus the sign of the number after it. All right, so again, when you have a negative number on the outside and you're distributing the multiplication, it's making everything inside the parentheses the opposite. All right, we're going to do some practice together in class.